Hello everyone, welcome to episode 13 of Reading Layamon's Brut. Last time the fighting broke out between the Trojans and the Armoricans, led by King Goffar, and we saw the battles become particularly brutal, and they resulted in the King Goffar fleeing into France, and that's where we will pick up today. The King Goffar is aan his borst, and another himself at Breg. He vlieg out of his lande, and belovde his leerde. Into France he verde, der he vriend funde, to don Keisere, and his 12 veren, and told him of dan Balu, the Brutus him hevde idon. In a France weren it halde 12 veren, the Frenisch he klepeden 12 pair. Daar weren drichtliedje men, kinges he weren I klepede, that he oft kusten. Her behechten Goffaren den kinge, that her hine reken wolden, reken hine of his unweenes, that him the ethere weren. The King Goffar saw his ruin or destruction. This is the defeat that was inflicted upon him last time by Brutus and Corineus, and uneasily, I'm hesitant to translate this word as uneasily, simply because it might suggest that our word uneasy comes from uneather, because they do look similar and they have a similar meaning. That's actually not the case. Uneasy and ease come from, they're Romance loanwords, whereas uneather is from Old English rather than Romance languages. So, and he uneasily or barely escaped himself. He fled out of his land and left behind his people. Into France he went. There he found a friend. So he went to France, to the emperor, and to his 12 companions, and told them of the destruction which Brutus had done him. In France there were numbered 12 companions. The French call them the Ducepair, the 12 peers, and this is interesting here. The 12 peers are 12 warriors who are Charlemagne's band of heroes in the chanson de geste tradition of early medieval, or mid-medieval French epics, most famously the chanson de Roland, the Song of Roland. And the two most famous of the 12 peers are Roland and Oliver, and they figure prominently, like I said, in the chanson de geste tradition, but they also show up in the later medieval Romance tradition, particularly in romances about Charlemagne, both in French and in Middle English as well. These, of course, can't really be the same 12 peers, because this is set many centuries before Charlemagne, so these are not Roland and Oliver and company. Nevertheless, it's interesting that we find them here. So they were warlike men. They were called kings. That they often showed, or I suppose demonstrated, made known that they were like kings. They promised to Goffar, the king, that they would avenge him. Well, yes, that they would avenge him. They would avenge him of his enemies, or against his enemies, so that it would be the easier or the better for him, for King Goffar. Her senden jand al France, and boden her verde, fulle 7 nichte her sommede knichtes, and Brutus lade his verde in Armorican erde, and he was sweete blide, for his muchele begate. Jand that lond he gon ernen, and the tunes for bernen, and herjede that lond, and tauchit to his achrehond. Al that lond he wiste, and al he hit awalde, swa he verde mit his here, that he on Anne hul become. He was fire and high, and he hine swither beheld. He nom rad at his monnen, that he wulde their castel makien. There the castel opstod. He was strong, and swither god. They, the 12 peers, sent throughout all France and summoned their armies. Full 7 nights they gathered their knights, so for a week. It took them a week to do it. And Brutus led his army into Armorican land. And he, Brutus, was very glad because of his great thing that he'd acquired, in this case, Armorica itself. Throughout that land, he ran, or hurried, and behaved like a bit of a barbarian, actually, and he burnt the towns, or completely burnt the towns, and he harried or pillaged that land, and sent it to his own hand, so put it within his control. This setting of land in one's own hand is a phrase that we will see many, many times throughout the rest of the text, so it's perhaps one to commit to memory. He guarded or protected or kept all that land, and he controlled all of it. So he went with his army, such that, or until he arrived at a hill. He, referring to the hill, so it was beautiful and high, and he, Brutus, looked upon it, the hill, very much, or he looked greatly upon it. He esteemed it highly, is the sense. He took counsel with his men, and remember, I think we saw this earlier in the text, that when you have verbs of taking with rad, meaning counsel, it means to reach a conclusion by way of consultation. So he and his men concluded that he, Brutus, would make or establish a castle there. Then the castle stood up. It was strong and very good. So they're quite industrious, because if it's only taken a week for the 12 peers to summon their armies, then presumably this castle must have gone up in a week. That's quick. Unless it's... we probably shouldn't think of it as a big, proper, full stone castle. It's some sort of fortification anyway. Nesit buten luttel wheele, that Goffar, king, kom him leathen, mit unimette ferd of Frenchische volk, and of alle van London, that legend into France. There Goffar the king, then a castle kennede, swa swithe wa him was, that all his wit he forlas. Swithe he fuste dit rad kenne his ferde, her to dalden hem a 12, and tuchen on ulchere halve, and the Trojanish men hem kommen again, and anon leiden to than grund of than Frenische 3000. It was not but a little while, so it wasn't very long, that King Goffar came, going himself, so he arrived, with an immeasurable army of French people. And not just French, but they're also from all the lands that lay into or around France. Then Goffar the king knew or recognized the castle. Such great sorrow was to him that he completely lost all his wit. He went mad. Quickly he hastened thitherward to the castle with his, or he hurried his bold or courageous army. They divided themselves into 12 and went on each side. So they've surrounded the castle. And the Trojan men came against them. And straight away, or at once, perhaps not at once, maybe just soon, they laid to the ground 3,000 of the French. The French were nistormede, and natheless her stal markeden, and her beneathinges baird driven hem on Geinward. Brutun and his kempen her driven to than Kastler, and in their ilke for her falden of his iveren, and all die her ramden, and resten to than Kastler, that come to their nichte, that lengre her near michten. Idon Kastler was muchel dread, a tha midnicht her nomen red, that her wulden corineum to thon wood senden, mit alle thon volke, that her hefde on his ferte, and ferten ut swa stille, swa her stelen wulden, into an a thicke wood, that there on fest was. The French were attacked, or they were stormed, and nevertheless they made a stand, so they held their ground, and this is a curious phrase here, by nithinges bared, by the conduct of a coward, literally, they drive, so the French drive them, the Trojans, backward. Now, I'm not 100% sure what to make of this. Nithing is actually a bit stronger than a coward. It's really one of the worst things you can call somebody in Middle English. It's very inflammatory, especially in a warrior culture, so to refer to a warrior as this is quite serious. Now, Frederick Madden in his edition translates this as the gesture of a coward. Why exactly the French should be referred to cowards here when they're actually gaining the upper hand for fighting courageously is a bit odd. It could just be the standard thing where you refer to your enemies as cowards, and the French are enemies of the Trojans, who are our heroes, so we're going to refer to them as Nithingers, as cowards here. Rosamund Allen takes a slightly different approach in her translation, and she translates by Nithingersberd as by scorn, so these people are showing incredible scorn to the Trojans, and so that's a possible reading as well. So they drive, and this suddenly we have present tense verbs here, so they drive the Trojans back, they drive Brutus and his warriors, they drive them into the castle, and in that very, or the same, for means journey or going of some sort, here clearly means attack. So in that very attack, they felled of his companions, so they felled some of his companions, and all day they attacked and assaulted the castle, so that it came to the night, or until it came to the night. It was night, so that they could not any longer keep attacking, so they have to stop because it's too dark. In the castle was great dread. At the midnight they took counsel, so they reached the decision that they would send Corineus to the woods with all the people that he had in his army, or in his company. And they went out very stilly, or very quietly, as though they wished to steal, into a thick wood, which, now my inclination is to read this as which was fast by there, so which was close by the castle. Rosamund Allen translates this as to the west of the castle. I'm not completely sure which of those readings is the better, so I'll just offer them both for your consideration here. Brutus was Idon Kastler, and he no well wuster, a marwen though it dauerde, and die kom to volke. Brutus was on bulken, so a bith the wilde bar, when hundes hine bestondeth, Idon wodelonde. Brutus hechte his bernes, don on hera burnen, and hera wapne god for her to fecht schulden. Op her duden hera Kastles gaten, and koflitje utwenden. Fursten to dan Frenischen, and her hem tuchan fengen. There was fecht swede strong, on elche halve hit was store. There was monies kunnes volk, and moni knicht fire. Brutus was in the castle, and he guarded or kept the castle, well. In the morning, when it dawned and day came to the people, Brutus was enraged, as the wild boar is, when the hounds stand around or surround it in the woodland. Brutus commanded his warriors to put on their armour and their good weapons, for they must to the fight. We could supply a verb of motion here, so they must go to the fight. Up they put the castle gates, or the gates of the castle, and quickly they went out. They hastened to the French and took against them. It's not entirely clear here who this pronoun "her" is referring to. Is it referring to the Trojans, or is it referring to the French? So the French took against them, the Trojans. That probably is the most likely reading, that "her" refers to the French, because we find a similar construction later on where this is referring to them, as we shall see in a moment. There was a very fierce fight on every side. It was strong, it was harsh or severe. There was people of many kin, of many nations, many peoples or tribes, and many a knight doomed. There hefde Brutus enemai heichte Turnus, swa woed he was to fechte, that he fai werth. He velde the Frenche, und verle kunne wiesen, mit his achene hunden, he falde money 100, ach he ferde to fair, ut from his feren, and her him to liefden, an elchere sieden, mit wepnen hine woundeden, and serthen hine slowen. Brutus hine funde dead, and into than castle duurde, and therine be burchete, be ane staan wale. Through than ilke Turnus tours was he hatten, Turwine al that lond, thurch Turnus death. There Brutus had a kinsman called Turnus. He, Turnus, was so mad at the fight that he became doomed. He felled the French in many sorts of ways. With his own hands, he felled many hundreds. But he went too far out from his companions, and they, this is the construction that I was alluding to just before, so they, being the French here, came to him, so they surrounded him on every side. With weapons, they wounded him, and afterwards they slew him. Brutus found him dead, and put or brought him into the castle, and therein buried him by or beside a stone wall. Through or because of the same Turnus, or this very Turnus, Tours was named. So this place became Tours. Touraine, all that land, was also got its name because of Turnus's death. Brutus ferde ut, and fuste to fichte, reken he wulde his ternen, and Turnus his wine leve. To gathera her kummen, and grundliche unsluwen. There was billy bed, there was balu muchel, and fecht unimete, fire their felen. That fecht was wunder strong, da Corineus of wood kom, mit muchelene ferde, Bruton to fulste. Brutus was on an half, Corineus an other. Her letten to gliden gares swithe sharpe, her kwalden the Frenche, alle the her funden. Thus her wasten that lond, and slewen the lerden. Brutus went out from the castle, and hastened to the fight. He wished to avenge his injury, and also to avenge Turnus, his dear friend. They, the two sides, the Trojans and the French, came together and violently slew each other. This is that word that we saw before with the definition given by the MED as to engage in mutual killing. So they slew each other, they killed each other. There was a bill. Now, a bill is some sort of bladed weapon, probably with a hooked blade, so it could be a pike or some sort of axe. We'll just go with pike here. So there was the pike beaten, so the weapons are clashing together. There was great destruction, and a peerless or an immeasurable and incredible fight. The doomed fell there. That fight was incredibly fierce when Corineus came out from the wood with a great army to support Brutus. Brutus was on one side, Corineus was on the other. They caused to fly very sharp spears. They quelled, or they slaughtered the French, all that they found. Thus they laid waste to the land and slew the people. Nes never the moni boren, nes wa wismoni kuren, the kuthe idon dacha tellen of than dere, who moni 1,000 there weren elide to grunde. Da blew Brutus, and bunnede his ferde, and speken together of fairle wisdomes. Her funden on rade that her faren wulden, her letten lude klepien, and kuthen jern that ferde, that Brutus the sele to their sair wulde, swa her ferden to her shippe, mit allen her fenge, and mit silvere and mit golde, there was Goffares kinges, and their freinische monnen, the idon fecht for worthen. There was never a man born, nor a man chosen as so wise, or this could be a choice man so wise, as an excellent man who was wise enough, so wise that he knew in that day how to count of the dead, so how to count high enough for how many people were killed there, how many thousands were laid to the ground there. Then Brutus blew his horn and summoned his army, and they speak together, or he summoned them to speak together, of lots of wisdom, great wisdom. And they found in council, so they arrived at the decision that they would leave, they would go away, after they've slaughtered everyone, but anyway. They caused to call loudly, to be called, and to be made known throughout all that army, that Brutus the Good would go to the sea. Once again, we supply a verb of motion. Thus they went to their ships, with all their takings, all their spoils, and with the silver and with the gold, which was Goffar the king's, so beforehand, had belonged to Goffar, and also the Frenchmen, which belonged to the Frenchmen, who in the fight were destroyed or were ruined. And that's where we will leave it today. So the Trojans are finally leaving France and setting sail once again, and we'll see where their journey takes them next time. As ever, thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, comments, corrections, or feedback, please don't hesitate to get in touch, and you can do that either by way of the comments below this video or by way of the Facebook page that I've made for the series, and you can find the link to that page in the video description. All the best, and I'll see you next time.